Hey guys, Phase here. In today's video, we'll deep dive melee SLAMS. SLAMS revolve around Warcries, big two-handed melee weapons, and powerful attacks. We'll cover Sunder, Earthshatter, Groundslam of Earthshaking, Perforate, and Volcanic Fissure of Snaking. We'll also look at Ascendancies, compare SLAMS, and have a DPS Showdown. Let's jump right in. First, let's take a look at the mechanics behind SLAMS. The philosophy of SLAMS is different than most builds in Path of Exile. Instead of hitting fast, what if we instead hit really hard? To achieve this, we use Warcries. Warcries are usable, support-style skills. Warcries have a cast time that can be sped up with Warcry speed, and Warcries have a cooldown that can be lowered with Warcry cooldown recovery rate. Warcries grant two things, Exerts and Buffs. Exerts modify attacks in different ways. For example, Intimidating Cry exerts grant double damage. Multiple exerts can be active at the same time and every attack consumes one of each exert. The general idea is to maximize exert uptime by balancing the number of exerts, Warcry cooldown, and attack speed. Grab Measured Fury for an extra exert. Berserker's Warbringer doubles the number of exerts, which is massive. Deep Breaths is great to reduce Warcry cooldown, especially for Earthshatter or non-Berserkers. Leap Slam can waste exerts, so be sure to craft Warcries cannot exert travel skills, or take the mastery if you enjoy dealing damage. The other side of Warcries are buffs. Manually using a Warcry near enemies grants a buff. The strength of buffs depends on the total power of nearby enemies when the Warcry is cast. Higher rarity enemies give more power. Warcry buff effect further scales the strength of buffs, while Warcry duration makes buffs last longer. Let's quickly illustrate how power is calculated. To gauge power, we'll use Seismic Cry's armor buff. Seismic Cry is used, snapshotting the enemies in range and adding their power together. At 20 power, we get exactly 20% more armor. Let's take out a few guys. At 16 power, it dropped to 15% more armor. While Warcry buffs aren't necessarily critical for success, understanding how buffs work can lead to better positioning, Warcry timing, and ultimately result in a stronger character. From my in-game testing, the base Warcry radius is roughly 4.5 meters. Enemies in the radius count towards power, get taunted, and apply any other Warcry specific effects. Radius is scaled by deep breaths and generic area of effect. Autoexertion, well, automates exerts. Warcries linked to autoexertion repeatedly trigger over and over. 15% of mana is reserved for each linked Warcry. Each triggered Warcry costs a static 10 mana. This adds up quickly. Minus mana crafts are critical. So, how many Warcries should be auto-exerted versus manually pressed? There's no right or wrong answer here, it depends on the build and desired playstyle. Overexertion is a large damage multiplier that incentivizes running as many Warcries as possible. Generally, I'd recommend manually pressing 2 or 3 Warcries and then auto-exerting any others. Let's take a look at the various Warcries. Intimidating Cry exerts deal double damage. It also intimidates nearby enemies for 3 seconds. Intimidating Cry should be auto-exerted. Seismic Cry exerts grant a massive 50% more area of effect. It's fantastic for mapping. It has a nice buff, up to 25% more armor and reduces the chance of being stunned. Infernal Cry exerts trigger an extra attack called Combust for a bit of extra damage. It also causes enemies to explode when they die. The buff grants up to 25% of physical as extra fire damage. Rallying Cry exerts deal 5% more damage for each ally buffed. It's sometimes paired with Herald of Purity. Rallying Cry must be manually pressed to get the more damage bonus. Battle Mage's Cry exerts trigger a linked spell on each attack, often used to automate curse application. Curse mana cost is paid on each attack, so run minus mana crafts or perhaps life tap. The buff grants up to a flat 2.5% base crit. Enduring Cry generates endurance charges. The buff grants up to 10% life regen. General's Cry, with its low cooldown, is often auto-exerted on Earthshatter to help detonate spikes. These are all the Warcries. Ancestral Cry cannot exert SLAMS, though it could potentially still be used for the buff. Vengeful Cry is highly conditional, but does see occasional use in some self-hit setups. A link to this sheet can be found in the description below. Next, weapon types. Axes have the highest DPS, more access to attack speed, and solid masteries. The main draws of maces are the all damage Chills Mastery, extra area of effect, and Overlord. One mace wheel with the Chill Mastery are some of the most impactful points on the passive tree. The best axes are roughly 14% more DPS than the best maces. Axes are often the way to go, but maces are not far behind. Staves see some use as crit with Eventuality Rod and Endurance Charge stacking. Impact Force Propagator from Heist is a nice source of 2 additional exerts. Fist of War shines with slow attack speed or slams with huge coverage. Slow weapons should usually be paired with some attack speed, so that character responsiveness and Leap Slam don't feel too slow. Echoes of Creation is an enormous damage multiplier. Its downside is a large chunk of physical self-hit damage is taken on every attack. Mitigate this with things like endurance charges, armor, overleech, recoup, divine shield, or flesh and stone. Next, Ascendancies. First up, Berserker. Berserker gets huge quality of life from doubled exerts, translating to fewer Warcries pressed and better exert uptime. With 40 rage, it gets an impressive 60% increased attack speed, on top of huge damage multipliers. The extra 10% damage taken is less of a downside now with buffed endurance charges, stronger item bases, and easier access to maximum resistances. Berserker is quite a beast. Next, Chieftain. Gearing is super easy with extra resistances, and there are more ways than ever to get 90 all resists. The Free Fist of War is a nice perk, but watch out for mana costs. Chieftain excels at scaling Warcry buffs, which can be powerful, but maintaining buffs means pressing Warcries every 6 to 10 seconds, which may not be for everyone. Chieftain has no attack speed. Gameplay may not be as smooth as other Ascendancies. Overall, Chieftain has an interesting kit. It may even have some unexplored potential. Next up, Juggernauts. Being immune to stuns and most action speed slows feels really good. Late game, Untiring synergizes nicely with Echoes of Creation. Unfortunately, Unbreakable is much weaker than it once was. Juggernaut does a little bit of everything, but it doesn't do anything particularly well for SLAMS. Next is Slayer. Overleech is fantastic life sustain. The 20% culling strike is always a nice surprise. Masterful Form means easy access to frenzy and endurance charges. Impact is a nice chunk of damage, area of effect, and may even enable precise technique on some setups. There are many ways to set up Slayer, but odds are it'll probably be pretty good. Let's rate the Ascendancies. First, Berserker. Huge damage, plenty of attack speed, and nice Warcry quality of life. 10% increased damage taken, just don't get hit. Second, Slayer. Even though there's not a lot of direct synergy with SLAMS, Slayer nodes are just really good. Third, Chieftain. Warcry buffs are strong, but it requires consistently pressing a lot of Warcries, which is a playstyle that's not easy to recommend. Fourth, Juggernaut. It simply doesn't bring much to the table for SLAMS, though Juggernaut still has some great late game setups. Next up, the SLAMS. First, Sunder. Sunder slams the ground and sends out a wave of 5 sequential areas, each area bigger than the last. The thing that makes Sunder special are its shockwaves. 5 enemies in each area send out shockwaves that damage other nearby enemies, which makes Sunder incredible against tightly clumped enemies. Sunder is very strong in campaign. Area of effect scales all aspects of Sunder, width, length, and shockwaves. Only one Sunder wave can be active at a time, though it's not usually a big problem for SLAMS. Sunder is in a decent spot. It excels in some areas, but not all. Next, Earthshatter. Earthshatter slams the ground and sends out 6 fissures. At the end of each fissure, a spike emerges. Spikes can then be detonated for extra damage in a few ways, by manually pressing a Warcry, automatically with an auto-exerted Warcry, or by leap slamming on top of a spike. Spike detonations can overlap for extra damage. Area of effect scales fissure spread and spike detonations. These roughly offset each other out in the open. However, near a wall or inside of a small cove, fissures stop expanding, but spikes still benefit from area of effect. In the open, expect 2 spike hits on average. Near a wall or cove, overlaps roughly double to 4 spike hits on average. Auto-exert General's Cry with its low cooldown to help spike detonation. Deep breaths is highly recommended. Generally, press a manual Warcry directly after 1 to 3 attacks to detonate spikes. Briefly turning off auto-exertion to pre-stack spikes is an option for phased bosses. Earthshatter is a fantastic slam that remains powerful in nearly every stage of the game. Next, Groundslam of Earthshaking. It slams the ground, creating a big damaging wave of terrain in a wide frontal cone. It hits once and hits hard, simple yet effective. It's also more likely to stun enemies. It's one of the fastest slam mappers. Damage is front-loaded and comes out quickly. There's also Vol Groundslam. Instead of a cone, it travels in all directions. Unlike other Vol Slams, it can be exerted, which is massive. It stores 4 charges and rapidly recharges. With enough damage, it's possible to alternate between regular Groundslam and Vol Groundslam between each pack. Groundslam of Earthshaking is an impressive mapper, has smooth gameplay, and a satisfying Vol skill. Next, Volcanic Fissure of Snaking. Initially, it slams the ground, creating a fissure that travels to the cursor, erupts, then travels to another nearby enemy, erupts, and so on, for a total of 4 eruptions. Fissures have AI and intentionally travels to erupt underneath enemies. The first fissure can even navigate around obstacles or corners. Fissures and eruptions count as melee hits, making Leech, Rage, and Fortify all incredibly easy to maintain. For mapping, put the cursor far ahead so that the initial fissure hits enemies in your path, and then continue snaking out in front of you. It's a comfortable mapper. The coverage and the lingering damage both feel fantastic. On single target, don't put the cursor over the enemy, but instead put the cursor right outside of the enemy's model or hitbox to get 3 hits per attack. Alternatively, clicking anywhere on the opposite side of the enemy will also hit 3 times. An enemy that's moused over with a red stroked outline will lead to only 2 hits. Damage can either be scaled as pure fire or 40% cold or lightning conversion with Trinity. The inversion mastery can be a solid damage boost. Volcanic Fissure unfortunately can't be exerted, so it's not really worth running. While bossing, visual ground effects can be hard to see, especially on Cyrus and Exarch. I played Volcanic Fissure of Snaking on Berserker in Hardcore SSF last league and killed all Ubers, and it was a blast. In some ways, it feels like a damage over time minion, as the fissures aggressively seek out enemies and linger around for a couple seconds. Volcanic Fissure of Snaking is an incredibly fun slam to play, and mechanically it's absolutely insane. Next is Perforate. Perforate changes depending on whether you're in Sand Stance or Blood Stance. In Sand Stance, spikes are sent outwards in a circular pattern. In Blood Stance, spikes burst from the ground in a small area. Sand only hits once, while blood spikes overlap, hitting many times. Mapping is done in sand with occasional swaps to blood for single target. Sand clear is decent, but it's sometimes a bit uneven and leaves stragglers. The real power of Perforate comes from Blood Stance. It typically hits 7 times for big damage. There's also a transfigured version, Perforate of Duality. There's 4 fewer spikes, but it gets 10 extra spikes if you've changed stance in the past 4 seconds. This doesn't do much for Sand Stance, but in Blood Stance it typically hits around 11 times for a massive 57% more damage than the default gem. Perforate of Duality can reach some absurd damage numbers. However, stance swapping means gameplay can be awkward, so Duality is more of a bossing skill. It's a bit too clunky for general mapping. While bossing, melee often has downtime anyways, so it's easy to swap into Blood Stance when damage windows open. Overall, Perforate isn't an ideal all-rounder, but it certainly excels in specific content. We won't cover every slam in depth, but there are a few others worth mentioning. Both Tectonic Slam of Cataclysm and Consecrated Path of Endurance can do some impressive things with endurance charge stacking. Earthquake is decent but often built as bleed, so it doesn't take full advantage of exerts. Ice Crash is a smooth mapper but doesn't really stand out otherwise. Let's put the slams head to head in a DPS Showdown. The character shown is essentially identical for every test, with only bare minimum changes as needed. And they're off. Perforate of Duality and Blood finished first, followed closely by Wall Earthshatter. Volcanic Fissure, Groundslam, and Open Earthshatter finished close together in the middle of the pack. Rounding out the tail end are Sunder and then Sand Perforate. While this isn't a definitive damage comparison, it should give us a rough idea how these skills match up numerically. Let's compare the slams side by side. First, damage. Perforate, Blood, and Duality have the highest damage by far, followed by Earthshatter, then Volcanic Fissure. Mapping. Once Groundslam of Earthshaking gets some gear, it becomes a wrecking ball. Earthshatter and Volcanic Fissure are also great mappers. Bossing. Volcanic Fissure can very comfortably deal damage at range, and targeting isn't even required. Its downside is ground visual clarity. Perforate's bossing potential comes mostly from the raw damage of Blood Stance. Playstyle includes enjoyability, ease of use, and quality of life. The auto-targeting of Volcanic Fissure is fun to play and provides a surprising amount of safety. It handles a lot of thinking for you. Earthshatter spike detonations feel great. There's many ways to min-max gameplay with positioning and Warcry usage. Groundslam gameplay is smooth and satisfying. Vol Groundslam also significantly raises the fun factor. Sunder is enjoyable, but damage is delayed and overriding waves can sometimes be a concern. Perforate stance swapping coupled with pressing Warcries can be a bit much. Let's rate them overall. First is Volcanic Fissure of Snaking. It's really fun, damage is great, it's versatile, and it's incredibly safe. The mechanics of the skill are absurdly good. Fissures aggressively target enemies similar to fast-moving minions. You can't go wrong with Volcanic Fissure of Snaking. Second is Earthshatter. Great damage, smooth gameplay, solid mapper, and fantastic for progression. Spikes add a ton of damage and interesting gameplay considerations. Overall, Earthshatter is incredibly strong and is only slightly under Volcanic Fissure. Third is Groundslam of Earthshaking. It has insane coverage and damage comes out surprisingly fast. It's hard to beat for mapping, but it's not really a complete all-rounder. Fourth is Sunder. Sunder shockwaves are good, but past a certain point it's overkill for mapping. The downsides are delayed damage, a narrow damage pattern, and the possibility of waves being overwritten. Sunder is more of a campaign specialist, but past that it's somewhat of a jack of all trades and master of none. Last is Perforate. Perforate has huge damage potential in Blood Stance, but not much else to offer. There's often a bit too much clunkiness to fully commit to Perforate. Perforate of Duality cranks up its formula to the extreme, additional clunkiness for even more damage. Every one of these skills can clear all content in the game without question. SLAMs are powerful, fun, flexible, and have enormous variety. No matter the skill, you really can't go wrong with SLAMs. Here are some quick SLAM tips that may be helpful. A medium exert cluster with Warning Call and Lead by Example provide huge armor and permanent onslaught. With some investment, Mob Mentality can be used to maintain all charges permanently. It's sometimes beneficial to stagger Warcry gem quality for better uptime on certain buffs or rage. Grab some Tukahama Warcaller tattoos to reduce Warcry cooldown. Pair the Endurance Charge Body Implicit with Charge Duration for permanent Endurance charges. Admonisher is a solid anoint, especially for non-berserkers. Early League on physical damage builds, consider rolling a Viridian Jewel for Mana Leech. It may save passive points. Late game, Fuel to Fight is a great way to sustain mana. Many of the SLAMs covered here could potentially be played without Warcries. Intimidating Cry already grants double damage, getting it from other sources usually provides no benefits. This Rage Mastery helps sustain max rage. It can be paired with a minimum 10 power Warcry Mastery for permanent max rage. For non-slayers, Immortal Ambition gives Overleech, although the leech only lasts 5 seconds instead of Slayer's 10. Additionally, investing in a max leech rate can also be a huge boost to life sustain. Need quick endurance charges? Consider a Red Blade Banner offhand. Weapon swap then Enduring Cry for full endurance charges. The Eternal Apple is a creative way to automatically trigger Warcries. Self-hits from Echoes of Creation can give massive recovery with Corrupted Soul and Divine Shield, or Juggernaut's Untiring or Recoup. For Elemental SLAMs, Yoke of Suffering grants huge damage and shocks. Aim for 99% conversion with Poison and Bleed chance for even more damage. As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoy the content, click like and subscribe.